So, Ed, the first question for you. What timescale do you put to estate goals? How long is too long, and how do you decide that scale?
Wyn, could you just mention the first part of that question again, please?
What timescale do you put to estate goals? How long is too long, and how do you decide that scale?
I think everyone will approach their timescale very differently. What I would open with states have a very different time zone compared to a lot of private companies who are trying to satisfy shareholder demands on a quarterly basis. Estates will often look 20, 30, and in some cases 50 years out. So if you're looking at those sorts of distances, the further they go out, perhaps the more vague they will be, and that's only natural. So I suppose it's more conditional on having a plan, having that purpose, but ensuring that it's being continually modified.
Thanks, Ed. Sarah, the next question is for you from Sarah Hughes. So, suckler cows seem to have a good sustainable farming image. Calf at foot, grass-fed, permanent pasture, carbon sequestration, compared to many house dairy beef systems. How can suckler farms monetize this into improved profit in what can be a more expensive system?
Great question. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I completely agree. There are so many good things for sucklers. However, I think we need to first of all get the evidence behind what we're saying. So if we're saying carbon sequestration on suckler farms is better, then we need to get the evidence behind that. And throughout my Nuffield, I was thinking the conclusion was going to be that we needed to develop a brand for Suckler Beef because of all the things that you have highlighted. However, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we actually have a product that people will pay additional money for. So I think we need to improve our consistency, tighter guidelines as to when cattle are finished, making sure that there are mainly a grass and forage-based system. And I think then when we've got that all sorted, we can then go and start and develop a brand with a really good story.
Thank you, Sarah. And a question for Charlie. A lot of the examples you gave were quite high capital. Did you see any good examples which didn't need big upfront investment?
Yeah, we did. I think the Douth example that was picked up in the slides there is a good one there. Simply using a LiDAR survey, which is now relatively less thanks to the technology being able to be attached to drones. This was mapping overland flows and planting willow, which is readily available and can actually be cut from watercourses and planted locally. So that was a great example. I think other things included looking at grazing systems where the ground cover and stocking rates and such like were making sure that nutrients stayed where it should be, you know, species-rich lays and such like. You'd be surprised how low capital some of the things were. The biofiltro, the guys there are actively making it more affordable. It's using some products which are of other businesses, the plastic pallets in the bottom of the system. They were being shredded and cost to be disposed. So they're using those and off-the-shelf irrigation parts. So yeah, there's funny stuff, but there's also some things which are perfectly affordable.
Thanks, Charlie. For Barry from Emma, from your travels, Barry, what techniques did you see for leveraging farms to progress innovation? How can we encourage and achieve this in the UK? You're on mute, Barry.
Yes, that's a great question. Thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, I think especially in Denmark and Sweden, they were both countries which probably grew the most agri corporations from farms that I've seen. There was a number of examples of that. So I think that there needs to be much more, certainly entrepreneurship and innovation at the farm level, and it's trying to get policies that really encourage that in the future. And I think that subsidies probably has been an issue that, so there's a real opportunity to change that post-Brexit within agri-tech.
Okay, thanks, Barry. So I have now an excellent question from Charlie York to all panelists. So if you take that in the same order to avoid us getting confused, please. So I'll go to Ed, then Sarah, then Charlie, then Barry. So from your travels and the businesses you've all visited, what technology, processes, systems would you most like to see adopted more in UK agriculture?
Just a small question then, Wyn, to start with. I was incredibly impressed at the diversity of renewable energy systems that were being used. The Twickler estate in the Netherlands realized that to be fully sustainable by 2030 meant some very bold plans. They were in an area of outstanding natural beauty, and having multiple 5 megawatt turbines wasn't going to work. So they were able to look at ground source heat pumps, air source, using solar panels. They were employing batteries. I mean, it was quite extraordinary at the scale at which they were operating as well. And I feel that we perhaps don't have the hunger, the appetite for embracing those sorts of technology as much as perhaps we should do. We are in fact part of the solution. Thank you.
And Sarah?
So I didn't really see any really good technologies. I suppose in the suckler industry, it's more about getting the basics right and just understanding your costs. And like I said in my presentation, every producer I met knew how much their cows were costing them, and were using key performance indicators really well. And I'd love to see us adopt that practice as well.
And Charlie, I'm expecting a great answer from you because you've had more time to think.
See me writing notes when. Yeah, I think to see a circular economy enshrined in national policy would be a really high level thing that I'd like to see. And I'm going to follow on from Ed and take the Dutch example. This is at the University of Wageningen, and then their lighthouse farms has expanded this network multinationally from Latvia to Ireland, the South America, and then they're taking the best information from this and bringing it back in to inform more research and data collection. So to sort of sum it up, I think if we could have a circular economy and national policy of which agriculture would fit in very well, and then have it taught at our universities along with systems thinking and linking the research with practice on farm.
Go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, I suppose if agri-tech could become much more involved within the UK farm subsidy policy, which is due to come into effect in the next number of years, really to try and drive that innovation from the farm upward. And I think there's to be much involvement from farmers within that sector, and to really gain new income, but as well to try and become the innovators within the sector, as opposed to the innovation coming from agri corporations or the universities. Sorry.
Great, thanks, Barry. So we're going to do at least one more round. So a question for you, Ed. Do you think estate benchmarking will become a key driver to estate success, and how will you compare to others?
It's a very, very important aspect of running an estate. The basis, if you can't measure, you can't manage. And some of these businesses, these estates are vast, employing vast numbers of people with huge responsibility that have enormous impacts on communities and the environment. So I think benchmarking is absolutely key. The other point I'd make, and the second half of your question, Wyn, really, is in the absence of any defined benchmarking across the industry, even if they are neighbours, will be radically different because they will be chase different returns. It could be environmental stewardship, financial, it could be succession planning, and it's very much down to each individual estate to calculate what is most important to them. But as long as they are going through that process, then that is what I would strongly recommend.
Thanks, Ed. And for Sarah, is one of the main nutrition problems on beef farms the variability of the forage supply, both grazing and silage, limiting growth and mineral supply? For your information, from Mark Tripney, is closed and leading, and he should know better. You could just say yes or no if you like, but if you want to expand, that'd be great. Do you want the question again, Sarah?
Thank you. So yeah, good question. I do think we could be a lot better at managing our grass and forage. It is, at the end of the day, the cheapest feed, and in the UK we're pretty good at growing it because of the weather. You know, traveling to other countries and you know, particularly Australia, and seeing how little they have but how much they make of it, I think we could really improve. And actually, whilst I've worked the levy board over the last 5 years, I've seen that producers are really starting to think about their grassland management and implementing practices such as rotational grazing and looking at our wintering. So I think we are getting there, but there's still a way for us to go.
Excellent. And a really good variety of questions here. So for Charlie, circular farm or circular economy? How big should we think and what needs to happen?
Yeah, I think we do need to think big. The circular farm, I think, plays a key role in the circular economy or bio-based economy. There's so many products that, you know, we already see cycling onto farms, be it from the sort of municipal waste industries or, you know, be it council-based compost. It's all got to come back through agriculture, and these nutrient systems and the carbon capture has got to be kept within our shores. The circular economy provides a really good guideline for this. An economist called Kate Rayworth's written a brilliant book called Donut Economics, which outlines the sort of environmental ceilings that we shouldn't overshoot, and in the meantime keeping the sort of social dynamic going. And I think the bigger we think, the more successful it'll be and deliver the benefits of carbon reduction, the damaging extraction of raw materials, and I think there's some money in it as well. There's brass, I think the old adage is. So let's have a bit of a return to that and thinking of systems as a whole. That answers the question.
Yeah, well, 4,000 cows will help that, Charlie.
It's not for everyone, Win.
Barry, question for you. Could you explain how you envision a UK farmer-funded venture capital fund would work? Who spearheads and manages that?
That's another good question. I suppose there's a number of ways that could work. I think what I learned during my travels was that the cooperative model, which is much more common here in Northern Ireland, especially for the dairy industry and in some cases the beef and sheep industry, there's some positive attributes to that could be used within a venture capital fund. And it's really having that farmer backing to make it work. And I think there probably is opportunities there for cooperatives either within Northern Ireland or over in England or the UK to maybe branch out into that side of things and give farmers a platform to be able to invest if they so wish within companies, and really to try and get a return on investment for whatever they do invest.
Okay, thanks, Barry. So there's a question for Charlie and then Barry, but I think it may be one Ed or Sarah might want to pick up as well. So we'll start with Charlie and then Barry and see how we go from there. So how do we wean agriculture off artificial fertilizers, carrot or stick, carbon tax or subsidy?
Yeah, that was a good question. I think we've got to start by looking at the system as a whole. I mean, we've been obsessed with 3 key nutrients, and there's a couple more adding to the equation. We've been mining 74 nutrients out of the system since we've adopted sort of a NPK, maybe MAG model. So we definitely need to look at the soil as a whole. I think by starting there, we'll realise more to it than what can be produced from crude oil and dug out of the ground. This can progress on to using a more wholesome fertiliser, if you like, derived from organic sources. And I think this will see the benefit to the farmers as well. So it's perhaps an education piece rather than beating people around the head with a tax or you know, a subsidy. You know, we are starting to see the benefits on farm, and we haven't got all tricks in place at the moment, but just looking at a correlation between yield and organic matter, we're seeing a positive result, which I know a lot of other people are finding at the moment. So I think it needs to be labelled as a win-win rather than a punishment or a reward sort of system.
And same question for Barry. I think Sarah would like this, and maybe Ed.
Yeah, I mean, as regards subsidising it, I don't think that's probably going to lead to much innovation within the sector. Possibly one area that I heard about when I was traveling was carbon credits. So possibly creating some sort of a system where farmers could be paid for saving tax in that regard. That might encourage them to be much more efficient with the resources that they have. So I would probably adopt a carbon credit system as opposed to a tax.
Thanks, Barry. Sarah?
Yeah, so again, as I said, over the last 5 years, farmers have got much better at managing the grassland, but they've also recognised the importance of soil. You know, only on Friday, I was looking at worms because farmers have identified that if we can get the soil right, we can get so much out of it without costly fertiliser. And a number of farmers are also growing herbal maize and clovers in the hope to reduce their fertiliser bill. So it is coming, and it's just gradual.
Any comments, Ed?
Just a couple of points. Gavin Lane has asked a great question. The experience I've got, Win, is that the word subsidies is a very dirty word, particularly to New Zealand farmers. And they've been through that whole 1980s shift. And if you want to influence real and meaningful change, I think most people like incentive rather than being beaten over the head. So I think the incentives is the way to move. It could be a carbon tax. It could also be, on the flip side, tax breaks to encourage people as a positive incentive. For a very long time in the UK, it's been seen by the general public as public money for private goods. And I think moving to public money for public goods, if there's going to be accountability of how farmers operate and where the money goes, then there need to be incentives. And it doesn't need to be the Chancellor handing money out, but there could be positive incentives to make it work.
Okay, thank you all for that. A question for Sarah next then, from Kieran. Does pedigree breeding and do breed societies help or hinder progress in genetic improvement?
Oh, that's a nasty question. I think both. Breed societies have a great role because they provide the future cattle for the industry, obviously providing the sires. But I think there's a lot of work to do. I think the breed societies maybe could work better together to help develop a system which is much more user-friendly for farmers when they're trying to access information about genetics. Yeah, I think they need to have the industry in mind rather than their own breed, but I do think they have a great role, and I think it's a bit of an issue of demand. So I think the commercial producers also have a big role, because if they demanded an efficient suckler cow and wanted a bull that would produce that efficient suckler cow, then they would demand that off the pedigree producers, and then that would drive change within that industry as well. So yeah, I think it's a bit of both, really.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. And for Charlie, Oh, this remark tripped me again. Is this closed or open? Nothing is fine. While you look at your farm in terms of cradle to cradle possibilities, do you think there's a model where groups of farms should be working together to create these possibilities, where there's mixed cropping and stocking?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're seeing it not only with larger dairy units, but all anaerobic digestion plants where they're taking stock and shipping organic matter out further afield. There's a great example. There's a company just next to the mini factory in Swindon called CCM. They're actually taking the AD waste, using the heat from the AD engine and combining it to make a carbon positive fertilizer, which is actually got a nutrient content and in particular N comparable to that of AN. And they could take in waste from anywhere. There could be a series of these small plants regionally for farms or AD plants, and then they could push out their own carbon positive fertilizer, and it may be another income stream for some farmers or cooperatives of farmers to use. So it's a definite opportunity, and I think it sort of gives everyone the benefits of a mixed farming model without perhaps a lot of capital or sort of diversify specialisms too much, which obviously people have got better at over time. They're very efficient at doing one thing. So yeah, definitely big opportunity for that. Cool. To just thank Mark for the question, because he is my Nuffield mentor. So yeah, thank you very much.
He should know better than ask closed questions then, shouldn't he? So, question for Barry.
Yeah.
Of all the new technologies and innovations we will see in the fourth industrial revolution, which do you think are the top 3 that will transform the agricultural industry?
Top 3. I would say the first one would be hydroponics, which I've seen, especially in the larger cities in the United States. I know that's been used at the minute for human consumption. I think there's actually huge opportunities there to integrate that, especially into the likes of biogas plants here in the UK, and maybe be able to use the heat off it to be able to grow feed for livestock, to try and cut down on the amount of purchase feed from feed mills. So that would probably be one of the top ones. I think AI would be the second one. I think there's still a lot of potential there for what that can be used for, especially within the livestock sector. And probably thirdly, I would say there's still a lot to be done within renewables as regards new energy sources that can come from farms and can be used in farms as well.
Okay, and a question for Ed. This is from Nick Snell. How important are the public to the success of the estate in terms to them visiting and participating in events, etc.?
Thanks, Nick. That's a great question. One of the key takeaways I learned on a personal basis was the importance of the social license to operate, without which one comment was, I think, from New Zealander I met, if you ignore the public, if you ignore those around you, around the farms and estates, you're considered as ignorant and then arrogant, and then you end up with a bloody nose. So I understand that it is absolutely essential to engage, to be open, to support communities, and to be welcoming. There are so many benefits by collaborating, and I've seen that firsthand on so many different scales. And social capital is absolutely a key aspect that is often sadly glossed over or ignored at their peril by too many estates.
Thanks, Ed. So we now have a great panel question, and this may be the last question depending on time, but thanks to everyone who submitted questions. I've done a great job at that. So this is from Alison Andrews to all speakers, and we'll go Barry, Charlie, Sarah, Ed this time. Most of the speakers mentioned mindset as important in making progress, being more positive and resetting from current thinking, adopting new systems and being open to totally new concepts. but what can be done to change mindsets? How do we reach out to individuals in the sector or government planning? Would you like that again, Barry?
No, thanks for the question, one. I think a lot of these things have to be started from government policy and fed down through the industry. I mean, if you look back at how subsidies changed how farmers produce food and the amount of food that they produced, farmers usually respond to money. They're usually all the same, doesn't matter where it's in Europe or anywhere else in the world. So there needs to be a real change in the subsidy system, I believe, and also in the education system. You know, we need to try and encourage some of these growth sectors within the education system for young farmers and the universities as well. You know, there's a real opportunity there also. So I think it's a bit of both. It's policy and education.
Thanks, Barry. And Charlie?
Yeah, so I think we need a sort of bottom-up approach to this. You know, just things and seeing what's possible from my point of view has changed the way I think about it. And you know, trips to the States, people that have started with nothing and are now milking a huge number of cows, and then they're always looking for the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And just seeing those guys and talking to them is a great way to sort of change your mindset and open your mind to their way of thinking. You know, us sat here as Nuffield scholars, we've probably got a role to play in it to try and disseminate some of the information we've seen. We've all talked about mindset, so perhaps we can sort of be change agents in that respect. I think following that, as Barry sort of mentioned, there's industry incentives, education from levy boards and the agricultural colleges and universities, and hopefully then messages and the mindset will disseminate out to the rest of the industry, and it's going to help UK Ag sort of PLC prosper, I hope.
And Sarah?
Yeah, so I tend to agree with Barry that sometimes subsidies have provided a bit of a comfort blanket, but I think to really encourage change, it needs to be a mixture of everything that's been said. So we need policy, maybe some incentives, and also education. But I think most of all, it needs to come from other farmers and their peers. And like you say, Charlie, as Nuffield scholars, we have such an important role to discuss what other farmers are doing elsewhere, because at the end of the day, with all the changes that are happening with trade, they're going to be our competitors and we're going to have to compete with them. So I think we all have a really important role to play, but farmers seem to learn best from other farmers, so we have to work on that.
And Ed?
Well, Alison asked really a two-part question. The first one was on the mindset, and the second was on systems. In mindset, one of the great reports that's just been written this year by a 2019 scholar from New Zealand is Corrigan, who was talking about the resilience and mental fortitude within the rural sector, and advised Alison, if she's got time, to have a look through that. I think mindset is something you can't force on someone, but it is there for leaders within the industry, head of NFU and CLA, but also local and regional leaders, as well as the Nuffield Farming Scholars. And I think that's a key aspect of it. As to the new systems, I'd agree entirely with Sarah. It's policies, it's incentives that I think they're going to be crucial. Thank you.